So what are the differences between the House and the Senate? It's a pretty good question, and it's actually worth digging into a little bit, especially when it comes to how laws are made and how the power kind of changes if one party controls one and the other party controls the other. That kind of matters as far as how legislation is passed. So it's worthwhile to look into the differences between the House and the Senate. And we will do just that right here, so don't go anywhere. I'm Ben Leach, and this is The Ben Leach Show. Before we get any further into the video, I would like to give a shout out to my brother, Jake Leach, for thanking me for my commitment to producing quality content. I am in the process of learning editing software, so although this video might not look drastically different from my other ones, I'm hoping that later on down the road, now that I'm able to devote more time to the editing process, I will have better videos. So thank you, Jake, for the encouragement, and I hope to live up to your expectations. So let's get right into it. There are several differences between the House and the Senate that actually make a huge difference when it comes to how laws are passed. Now, I'm not necessarily going to get into in this video how a bill gets passed all the way through Congress and gets passed into law. That'll be a different video, but there are some differences that we can look at today that will still kind of help you sift between the different bodies, how they operate, and why it's important to pay attention to these sort of details. So the first difference that I'm going to outline is just the size of each body. Obviously, that's one of the main differences. The House of Representatives is the much larger body comprising of 435 members, or voting members. There are other non-voting members, but I'll probably talk about that in a separate House video. But just for the sake of simplicity, there are 435 voting members of the House of Representatives. But the Senate only has 100 members. And how each state kind of gets that representation based on House and Senate, the House is based on population. So depending on the population of your state will determine the amount of representatives that you get. Each state will at least get one representative. So there are several states that only have one representative. We have Wyoming and Alaska and Montana, just to name a few. But there are also states with very large numbers of representatives, California being over 50 representatives. So there's a big disparity between kind of the power when you look at the states being able to represent themselves in the legislature. The Senate, on the other hand, is just 2 per state, and it was meant to be just very equal. Every state gets 2, no matter how big or small it is. Now you might be wondering, well, why do we actually have two different legislatures? Why do we have the House of Representatives and why do we have the Senate? Well, that's a pretty good question, and it actually be traced back to the founding of our country. Now, when they were debating on how to set up a legislative body, there was obviously a disagreement between small delegations and large delegations. And you can probably guess which side each delegation was on. Larger delegations naturally wanted there to be a legislature based on the population of their state, because that would give them more power. Now, smaller delegations definitely did not want that because they knew that they would never have any laws passed that benefited them if it was only about population. So they wanted something that was going to be equal. They wanted an equal footing with larger delegations. So they wanted something where everyone had the same amount of representation. Thus became known as the Great Compromise, and we have a bicameral legislature. We have one that's based on population and one that's based on equality. So that's kind of how we get it. And you can kind of see where the founders placed an importance when it comes to how long they serve, which is the second difference that I'm going to get into. Now, the Senate serves in 6-year terms. Now, the founders of the Constitution wanted to do this for a couple of reasons. They wanted to do this, one, so that they could actually separate themselves from the people. Now, that sounds counterintuitive if you're trying to have a legislative body, but it actually stands to reason. Over a 6-year span, a lot of things can happen. I mean, a lot. We can see just from 2020 how much can happen in 1 year, much less 6. People's opinions change, and what's popular now might not be popular in 6 years. So having a 6-year term actually insulates you from the passions of the majority of the day. So they can actually spend more time and deliberate on more important issues that will serve to benefit Americans long term. So every state has equal representation and they have longer terms. That way they can actually get more accomplished. The House, on the other hand, being population-based, is also more democratic, meaning that they serve 2-year terms. So a lot of their terms are spent focusing on what the people want, because if they don't listen to the people in 2 years, they're going to be voted out. Thus, this body is actually more responding to the people. A lot of people see the Senate as a really slow-moving cog in the wheel of legislation, and they see the House as being a quicker body to action because they have to. Part of it is they want to get reelected, and the other part is that they only serve 2 years, so they have to get a lot done in those 2 years. But the Senate has that time to be spread out. The third difference is the amount of time that each body is allowed to discuss and debate certain issues. Now, you could reasonably assume that since every House of Representatives member is up for re-election every 2 years, that they would need some sort of time constraint in order to get things done, especially when you have such a large body of people. So they have time constraints when it comes to debating bills, debating other pieces of legislation. So they have time constraints, meaning that you can't have an unlimited amount of time to speak and thus filibuster a bill. But this is the case in the Senate because they have an unlimited amount of time to debate bills. This originates from a couple of things. One, they are serving 6-year terms, thus the hope and intent of this body is that they would spend more time debating certain issues to make sure that bills that are being passed into law are going to be beneficial to the American people, so they need more time to speak. But this also allows certain senators to filibuster a bill, meaning that they can continue to speak, and thus no action is actually taken on that bill. Now, there has been debate on whether we should remove this or not, since its use is kind of relatively new in comparison to the origin of the Senate. However, this has been a part of the Senate for a very long time. But I will get into that in a separate Senate video that I will make as well. But just know that that's a possibility and something that is debated. The fourth and final difference that I will talk about in this video is the distinct powers that each body holds. Now, the House of Representatives has the unique power to, 1, make all laws regarding taxes. The Constitution outlines specifically that the House of Representatives will be the body that all tax laws and tax changes originate from. Now, this is very important, especially to everyone listening to this video, because some form or another you pay taxes, whether that be sales tax if you're a kid or real taxes if you're an adult. Everyone pays taxes, thus making changes to those taxes is very important. So that's a distinct power that the House holds, is that they have to originate all laws that regard taxes. Now, another distinct power that they have is the power to draft articles of impeachment against the President of the United States. We saw this during Trump's presidency. There were articles of impeachment that were drafted and passed in the House of Representatives and then moved to the Senate. Now, this is actually where we get into the distinct powers that the Senate holds, because the Senate has the distinct power of having the trial for impeachment. So even though the articles of impeachment were drafted and passed in the House, they ultimately failed in the Senate. Now, this is why we've never actually had a president that's been fully removed from office. There have been now 3 presidents that have been impeached and one that has resigned, Richard Nixon, because he probably would have been removed from office anyway. But no president has actually been removed from having a trial in the Senate. But thus, that is a distinct power that the Senate holds. Another power that the Senate holds is the power to ratify treaties. They have that distinct power, as well as the filibuster and just the ability to have an unlimited amount of time to speak, but I already touched on that in my latter point. So those are basically the two distinct powers that each house holds. Now, obviously, there are more things that make the House and the Senate unique to one another, but this video was really just about the main differences that you can see between the two. But how does that affect if one party holds one and the other party holds the other? Well, it actually makes a pretty significant impact if one party holds both houses, both the House and the Senate, or one party holds the House and the other party holds the Senate, because it will directly affect your ability to pass legislation. It'll directly affect your ability to pass your agenda of what you're wanting to pass. If you have both the House and the Senate controlled by one party, naturally it's very easy to get any sort of agenda passed between the House and the Senate and then passed into law. But if you have one that controls the House and the other that controls the Senate, things will work a lot slower. And also, if one party holds the House, they might draft different tax legislation that you aren't particularly happy with. And if you hold the Senate, it will directly impact your appointments, which is one thing that I actually missed in my differences in distinct powers, because the Senate also holds the power of appointments. They have to appoint Supreme Court justices, the presidential cabinet members, as well as other justices, not just the Supreme Court, and ambassadors as well. So they have the power of appointment. The House doesn't have any say over appointments. So if the president doesn't match the party of the Senate, it could mean very difficult things if you're trying to appoint different justices, if you're trying to appoint your own cabinet members. It might spell disaster, and it might spell a really, really slow process and some compromises down the road. But those are the differences between the House and the Senate, and that's kind of how it affects if one party is in charge of both and one party controls the House and the other party controls the Senate. Like I said, I will be making more videos in the future specifically regarding the House and specifically regarding the Senate, but this is just a brief overview to kind of help you think about the two separately and maybe give you some information that you might have not known about the House and the Senate. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please like this video and consider subscribing to my channel and hit the notification bell to get updated on all my content that I will be releasing. As always, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of your morning, afternoon, or evening. But until next time, that's all I have for you. I'm Ben Leach. Have a great day.